Years ago, I read a quote from a preacher, old preacher from the 1800s named F.B. Meyer, and he was quoting Emerson. And I want you to see that, because I bet you've seen it before. If you don't know this little jingle, it's one you might want to write down. And don't worry if you can't write it down right now. Just look it up later today, or take a picture of the screen like Daniel's doing. Here's it goes. Sow a thought. Sow a thought. That means you plant a thought. You let it get rooted. Sow a thought, and you reap an action. Sow an act, and you reap a habit. Sow a habit, and you reap character. Sow a character, and you reap a destiny. Now, before I go any further in talking about temptation, there's one thing I need to make very clear. Because if you don't understand this, you're getting ready to tune out. Because if you think temptation is just a matter of saying no to those sins that you were warned about back in junior high youth group, it's a sign of immaturity for one thing, but there's a lot to learn. Now let me say this very carefully. In junior high youth group, the two main things that we were warned about, rightly so, were premarital sex and getting in with the drinking, partying crowd. There was a whole lot of youth messages and lessons about those two subjects. And there need to be, because those are dangerous things. But somehow in all of that, a few of us got this idea in our head that that's what sin is, basically those two things. And I'm telling you that you can be in a group of 50 and 60-year-old people, and you ask the discussion question, throw it out there, say, what are the things that we are tempted with today? And you know what one of the first two is always going to be? Sex outside of marriage and drinking or partying. Now, you'll even hear that in a little old ladies group. And I'm not saying they shouldn't be leery of those things, but come on. That's not really where Satan is most likely to get them at this point in life. And so they go away from the class thinking, oh, yeah, I've got it all down. Oh, my goodness. We need to pay attention to the teachings of Jesus, who taught very clearly, as I've pointed out before. He focused on two types of sins, two different types of sins. The sins of the flesh and the sins of the spirit. Sins of the flesh are those things I've been talking about right up until now. Usually has something to do with wild living. Sins of the flesh. And we teach and warn about those because they have tremendous destructive power. There's also a whole other category that's much bigger and far more detailed, the sins of the spirit. Sins of the spirit are things like greed, gossip, judgmentalism, condescension, condemnation, pride, hate. Man, you've heard me say this too. You can be a member in good standing. You can be a church leader in good standing and hate your brother or your brother-in-law, and nobody's going to stop you. And nobody's really even going to say much to you. Oh, but if you've been divorced, way back there somewhere, no, we can't use you. Something's wrong there. What did Jesus talk about the most? He talked about most the sins of the spirit. In fact, he spent most of his time with people who were caught up in the sins of the flesh, reaching out to them, showing them that not all religious people were like the ones they'd grown up around. Spent his time with them. his free time, but he spent his teaching focusing on the sins of the spirit, greed, the covetousness, the resentment, materialism. I had a little reminder this week, a personal reminder this week, of just how destructive to the soul materialism is. If we allow ourselves to become materialistic, that is, we spend a whole lot of our time focused on what we've got and comparing that to what somebody else has got. And now I have just got to get that. And something in all of that materialism poisons the soul. And as we're focused on all these things we want and we just got to have, you know what happens? We naturally forget about what God wants and what other people might want and what other people might need, things that we could do for them, but we don't even notice them anymore because we're too caught up in what we want. Dangerous stuff. And so, that's it. I want to read you a verse. 1 Corinthians 10, 13. 1 Corinthians 10 and 13. The temptations in your life are no different from what others experience. Now, stop right there. That does not mean that every single person in the building experiences the exact same temptations. No. We're all tempted in different areas. It's saying that no matter what your temptation is, you're not alone. There are plenty of other people in the world, possibly in the room, who struggle with the same things you do. You just don't know they're struggling with it, but they don't know you're struggling with it. No different from what others experience. And God is faithful. He would not allow the temptation to be more than you can stand. When you're tempted, he will show you a way out so that you can endure. That he will show you a way out so that you can endure. That brings us right back to the mousetrap. That brings us back to those 5 steps that lead into serious sin. The idea is somewhere along stage 1 or stage 2 or phase 3, you start recognizing, hey, I've done that. I think I'm right here. And if I keep going, that's your way of escape right there. That's your way of escape. The minute it dawns on you that, number 1, this is not heading anywhere good. And number 2, if I don't walk away now, I won't be walking away. When that happens, that's your way of escape. Oh, take it. That's the whole reason I'm teaching how it all unfolds, how the trap falls into place one piece at a time. Watch it. Look for the way out while there's time. First is suggestion. That's when the thought enters your mind. We talked about that enough last week. Then there's interaction. That's when you begin having a conversation with the temptation. By that, you start thinking through what's being offered here. Now, and how likely it is it that I would get caught if I did this? Or is it really as bad as I've been told? Maybe under this particular set of circumstances, it would be completely different, and this conversation begins. There are some conversations that should never happen. Some conversations that we need to stay out of or get out of as quickly as we realize we're in that conversation. Sometimes it might help to treat temptation like you treat a telemarketer. Do you know there are some people, believe there are still some people, I've witnessed it personally, inside this calendar year. There really are still people who will get a call from a telemarketer and they'll take it and they'll listen for 3 minutes before they finally say, I better not do that. And then the telemarketer hangs up on them before they can hang up. I've learned a trick that I'll just pass along in case you don't know it. I bet most of you know this, though. Whenever you answer the phone and there's this dead pause, you better hang up now while it's easy. Because you don't have to worry that you're going to hurt their feelings. You hadn't even started a conversation. Or even they call me and they say, Wiley, my first name, click. Because I know they don't know me. And I know they're wanting to sell me something. Don't let it get started. Don't let it get started. There are some conversations we should never let happen. I'll give you a few examples of stories of conversations we could never get into. One is the victim story. The victim story. People who see themselves as victims love to tell their story. And they will tell it to anybody who will listen. And every time they tell it, they like their story a little more. Because it explains a whole lot and even excuses some things that otherwise they would be responsible to change, to fix. Victims fall in love with their stories. Stories about bad things that happened. Raw deals you got. Ways you were hurt. We've all got those, but we don't all tell them over and over and over to keeping them alive. Bringing that which is dead and gone into the present and resurrecting it. And you participate in the resurrection of an old dead victim story when you listen to it. As soon as you recognize that's what it is, you might as well change the subject. Oh, by the way, if you're the one telling it and you recognize that's what it is, stop right there. Stop right there. Everybody will be happier. You will go away happier. I promise. You will go away more free. And so will they. Watch out for a victim conversation. Also, any kind of conversation where the mood or the tone of the conversation is really dark, negative, whining. It's just rattling off how this person offended me and what gall that person had. And did you see the way she pulled out in front of me and that look she gave me? And just feeding that kind of stuff. By the way, these people, I hope you're not one of them. If you are, please get rid of your CCF t-shirt. These people that get mad on the road because some little old lady doing the best she can pulled out in front of them going slow, they get so mad. Blaring down on the horn, tailgating. I got a little bit of little old lady in me, and I do stuff like that, and I look in the rearview mirror, and they're going, and they're trying to tell whoever's in there how ridiculous I am. I just smile and drive on. Take that mirror, flip it up in the top. I'm not going to join them in that. I'm not really their problem. Their problem is between their ears, and they're not dealing with it correctly. Don't join into that kind of thing, whether it's a conversation or whatever other form. Want more conversation to avoid? Any conversation that gets into, did you see her? Her clothes, her looks, her kids. Recognize pretty quick that whatever this is about, it's probably not going anywhere good. It's probably not going to meet the qualifications that the Apostle Paul laid out when it comes to choosing a conversation. He says, whatsoever things are pure, whatsoever things are noble, whatsoever things are lovely, whatsoever things are of good report. Think on these things. And what you think about, you will talk about. What you think about and talk about will affect how well you are able to guard your mind from the tempter, whether he's tempting you into some sin of the flesh or whether he's tempting you to hate, to despise, to fear, to worry. I said there's some conversations we should never have. And when it comes to the tempter, and he is talking to you about an area of life where you are weak and you know it. Oh, you got to realize you are talking with a mortal enemy who doesn't fight fair in the debate, and he is far smarter than you are. And if you get into that conversation, you will eventually wish you hadn't, because it's going to pull you lower and lower and lower until you just completely fall. Get out of those conversations. I mentioned Little Red Riding Hood. It's bad enough she had to talk to the big bad wolf in the woods when her mama had plainly told her, you run into a big bad wolf, don't get in a conversation with him. But then she got to Grandmama's house. And Nathan, what did she see there? Grandmama, what a big nose you have. Oh, Grandmama, what a big snout you have. Grandmama, there are some conversations you shouldn't have. And I want to make it as plain as this picture of a German Shepherd in Grandma's clothing. When you walk in and you see that laying in the bed, it's time to go. Proverbs 1:17. Proverbs 1:17. If a bird sees a trap being set, it knows to stay away. If a bird sees a trap being set, we're learning right here how to recognize and spot the trap that's being set so that you stay away and you fly away to freedom. Now let's do an application here. Supposing your big temptation is to worry. You're bad about worrying and you just can't stop worrying. And you've tried making yourself feel guilty for worrying by saying stuff like, well, when I'm worrying, it's insulting God because it's showing I don't trust him. And plenty of people have put those kind of ideas in your mind. Oh, you have little faith. You just have a weak faith or you wouldn't be worrying. Well, I don't know how true that is, but I do know how ineffective that is in helping anybody. To simply make somebody feel worse about a weakness they already feel terrible about only pulls them down more. If your temptation is worry, or if your temptation is to be sucked into despair, and you get in certain conversations with yourself or another person, you start focusing on the wrong thing, and the next thing you're in a deep depression that'll keep you there for a week or two, if not more. What do you got to learn to do? Not lecture yourself. You got to learn to do what Burr Rabbit did not know how to do. And that is, when you see the tar baby beside the road, you just keep hopping on by. Now, I know that at least half of y'all don't even know what Burr Rabbit is, who Burr Rabbit is, or the Tar Baby. I just got to give you the quickest version. I've touched on this before. Burr Rabbit was a rabbit. He was constantly being chased by Burr Fox and Burr Bear. They were much bigger. They were much stronger. But Burr Rabbit was sly. He was smart. He was quick on his feet. Of course, Burr Fox was pretty sly too. And if Burr Fox couldn't get him one way, he said, we'll get him another. So they made a little boy out of tar, sculpted a little boy out of tar, put a hat on him, buttons for eyes, like a snowman, only from tar, coat, fork for a nose, sat him by the road, Burr Rabbit hopping by, hopping along, zippity-doo-dah. How do you do? But the Tar Baby said nothing. How insulting can you get? We're the only ones out here on the road, and I speak to him, and he just ignores me? I won't put up with that. You need to learn some manners. I said, how do you do? Tar Baby said nothing. This thing started getting out of hand. Burr Rabbit started bowing up. That Tar Baby just wouldn't take it back. He wouldn't say hello. Next thing you know, Burr Rabbit popped him. And then uppercut, a knee, then a foot. And next thing you know, he was so stuck in the tar he could hardly move his eyeballs. And that's when Burr Fox came creeping out of the bushes, dancing along like the devil. Got him. You understand what I'm saying? There are some Tar Babies that you just have to hop on by. Because if you stop and you engage them, you start interacting. It may be a person that you got no business being around. It might be a thought pattern. It might be a conversation that you know you don't need to be in. Once you start, here's what happens. Once you start that conversation, here's what you're going to find. The more you fight it, the more power you give it. That's what's happening with Burr Rabbit. Once you let yourself get wrapped up there, the more you fight it, the more stuck you get. And you can get so stuck that none of us can get out on our own. And that's why all of us, at some point in life, are going to find ourselves stuck in a trap, thinking, I can't believe I let it go this far. I thought I would quit before I got hooked. I didn't expect to get caught, and here I am. Now what do? Well, let me tell you a short story, true story. Just a few years ago off the coast, San Francisco Bay, tourist boat spotted a whale floating near the surface. Not swimming, just floating, now and then dipping down, but quickly popping back up as if all the energy were gone. The greatest of God's creatures, the biggest, was now very weak. He'd been thrashing around in this conglomeration of nets and hooks and lines. It probably started one day when he swam by too close to a fish hook. And somebody snatched a reel and he was caught in the back. And he was so strong that he broke that line immediately and swam away, but the hook was there. And the hook began to snag on other things. First a net that snagged and then got around one fin. Before long, a rope, an anchor with just a little chain dangling, got into the hook. And one step at a time, see? The whale, helpless. So a group of rescuers came out. And they brought all the rescue equipment they had. They were well trained at what they did. But they realized there's only one way we're going to free this whale. He's not far from dead. Another day he'll be gone. We got to find a way to save him. And as they surveyed this complicated web of, they realized that somebody was going to have to get in the water with him. Hear that, folks? Somebody's got to get in the water with some of these people gotten themselves trapped. Even though it's dangerous, even though it's scary, one slap of that whale's tail could have still killed a full-size man. They got in the water, a couple of them did, and with curved knives and pliers, they worked and they worked. There was one fishing line that ran through the whale's mouth and had it pulled tight like this. And the man who cut that free later said, as I was cutting, the rope lodged in his jaw and mouth. His eyes followed my knife the whole time. And then, when the whale was free, before he swam off, he swam to each of the rescuers, one at a time. Bumped him on the shoulder. Bumped him on the leg, as if to say, thank you. Thank you, I'm free because you cared enough to get involved. And when people you know get trapped and they get wrapped up in things that you know you'd have been smart enough not to gotten into, then again, perhaps it could have been you. Somebody's got to get in that water